For many years, like so many gardeners, I saw mulch as simply a cover. It was a tool to keep the weeds down and make the garden look tidy. I would walk through garden centres and see bags of dyed wood chips in bright red or dark black, promising a low-maintenance garden for the season. There were also rolls of thick plastic sheeting and landscape fabric, sold with the guarantee that nothing would grow through them. It all seemed so logical and efficient. My initial belief was that a good mulch was one that smothered everything, creating a clean slate upon which my chosen plants could grow without competition. The focus was entirely on suppressing weeds, not on feeding the soil. I experimented with these modern mulches, as many of us have. I rolled out the black plastic, cutting small holes for my vegetable plants. At first it worked as advertised. Very few weeds appeared, and the ground underneath stayed moist. However, over time, I noticed the soil beneath the plastic felt different. It was compacted and lifeless. When I eventually pulled it up at the end of the season, there was a strange smell, and the soil was dense and clammy, with no sign of worms or other soil life. It was a sterile environment, a far cry from the vibrant, living soil I knew was essential for healthy plants. This observation sparked a deep curiosity and a desire to find a better way. The dyed wood chips presented a different set of problems. They looked neat, certainly, but they did very little for the soil itself. In fact, as the wood chips slowly began to decompose, they would draw nitrogen from the top layer of the soil to aid their own breakdown process. This often left the plants nearby looking a little pale and struggling for nutrients, the opposite of what you want from a mulch. It became clear to me that these popular commercially available mulches were designed more for aesthetics and weed suppression than for the long-term health of the garden ecosystem. They were a temporary fix that often created more problems down the line. This journey of observation led me to question the very definition of mulch. Was it merely a barrier, or could it be something more? I started to look at nature for answers. In a forest, nobody lays down plastic or spreads dyed wood chips. The ground is covered by a layer of fallen leaves, twigs, and decaying plant matter. This natural blanket teems with life, and the soil beneath is dark, crumbly, and wonderfully fertile. This was the model I needed to follow. It was a shift in perspective, from seeing the soil as something to be controlled and covered, to seeing it as a living entity that needed to be fed and nurtured from the top down, just as nature does. Modern mulches, particularly plastic sheeting and woven landscape fabric, create a significant problem for the soil. They cut it off from the essential elements of life. These materials are impermeable, meaning they block the free exchange of air and water between the soil and the atmosphere. While they do prevent water from evaporating, they also stop rain from penetrating evenly, leading to dry pockets and waterlogged areas. More importantly, they suffocate the soil. The vast community of microbes, fungi, and invertebrates that are the engine of soil fertility need oxygen to survive. By placing an airtight lid on the garden, we are effectively starving these crucial allies, turning rich, living soil into a dense, anaerobic, and unhealthy medium. The biological impact of these synthetic covers is devastating. Earthworms, the great cultivators of the soil, cannot thrive in such an environment. They need to travel between the surface and deeper layers, and they feed on organic matter. Plastic and fabric mulches offer them nothing to eat and block their movement. When you lift these materials, you will rarely find the busy network of worm burrows that aerate and enrich the soil. Without worms and other beneficial organisms, the natural processes of nutrient cycling grind to a halt. The soil becomes compacted, its structure degrades, and it loses its ability to support robust plant life without the constant addition of chemical fertilizers to compensate. Dyed wood chips, while not as destructive as plastic, present their own set of challenges. The dyes used to color them can sometimes contain unwanted chemicals that may leach into your soil over time. Furthermore, fresh wood chips have a very high carbon-to-nitrogen ratio. This means that as the soil microbes work to decompose the woody material, they require a large amount of nitrogen. They pull this essential nutrient from the surface of the soil, making it unavailable to your plants. This is why you often see yellowing leaves on plants, mulched with fresh wood chips. They are being starved of nitrogen, even if the soil deeper down is fertile. Ultimately, these modern mulches fail because they treat the soil as an inert substance. They are based on a philosophy of separation and control, rather than one of cooperation and nourishment. They create a sterile barrier between the plant roots and the rich ecosystem that should be supporting them. A healthy garden is not a sterile environment. It is a bustling community of life working in harmony. By choosing mulches that smother this life, we are fundamentally misunderstanding what makes a garden thrive. We are opting for a short-term, tidy appearance at the expense of long-term soil health and vitality. The ancient mulch method I now use and advocate for is beautifully simple and is based on mimicking nature's own processes. It involves using old plant matter, partially decomposed organic material, as a surface covering. This is not fresh green material, nor is it tough, woody material. Think of the residue from an old compost heap, spent mushroom compost, or even very old, well-rotted animal manure. This material has already gone through the initial hot stages of decomposition. Its nutrients are stable and ready to be made available to the soil life. This method has been used for centuries, long before plastic or bags of bark were ever conceived, by farmers and gardeners who understood that feeding the soil was the key to a successful harvest. The history of this practice is rooted in thrift and observation. Gardeners and farmers of the past did not have access to garden centers or chemical fertilizers. They had to work with what they had. They saw how leaf litter in a forest created rich soil, and they applied the same principle to their plots. They would pile up all their garden and kitchen waste, let it rot down over a year or two, and then spread this dark, crumbly material on the surface of their beds. This was not dug in, it was simply laid on top. This no-dig approach, combined with an organic mulch, fed the soil, suppressed weeds, and conserved moisture all at once, using a resource that was free and readily available. The material itself is key. Unlike fresh grass clippings, which can form a slimy, impenetrable mat, or woody bark chips that rob the soil of nitrogen, this old plant residue is perfectly balanced. It is carbon-rich enough to provide a slow-release food source for soil organisms, but not so carbon-heavy that it locks up nitrogen. The material is already teeming with beneficial microbes and fungi from the composting process. When you spread it on your garden beds, you are not just adding a protective layer, you are inoculating your soil with a vibrant community of life that will immediately get to work improving the soil structure and releasing nutrients. This approach is the heart of no-dig gardening. We are not disturbing the soil structure by digging. Instead, we are continuously feeding the soil life from the surface. The ancient mulch of plant residue acts as both the meal and the blanket. It protects the soil from the elements, prevents most weed seeds from germinating by blocking out light, and provides a constant, gentle supply of food for the earthworms and microorganisms. It is a holistic system where every component works together, creating a virtuous cycle of fertility and health that builds year on year, with less and less effort required from the gardener. When you apply a layer of ancient plant residue or compost as a mulch, a remarkable transformation begins just beneath the surface. One of the first and most noticeable changes is in soil temperature and moisture. This organic blanket acts as insulation. In the heat of summer, it keeps the soil cool and prevents the top layer from baking hard in the sun. It also dramatically reduces water evaporation, meaning you need to water far less often. During cooler months, it protects the soil from frost, allowing the soil life to remain active for longer. This stable, moist and temperate environment is the perfect habitat for the organisms that build soil fertility. Within weeks, you will see a dramatic increase in earthworm activity. If you gently pull back a small section of the mulch, you will find a network of worms working at the interface between the compost and the soil. They are drawn to the surface by this new food source. As they consume the organic matter, they drag it down into their burrows, mixing it into the soil profile. Their burrowing action creates channels that aerate the soil and improve water infiltration. Their castings or manure are incredibly rich in plant-available nutrients. These worms are nature's plows, tilling and fertilizing your garden for free without disturbing the delicate soil structure. Alongside the worms, an invisible army of microbes gets to work. The compost mulch is rich in bacteria and fungi, which are the primary decomposers in the soil food web. They break down the complex organic compounds in the mulch into simpler forms that plant roots can absorb. A particularly important group are the mycorrhizal fungi, which form a symbiotic relationship with plant roots. The fungi extend the reach of the root system, helping plants access water and nutrients from a much larger volume of soil. In return, the plant provides the fungi with sugars. A compost mulch encourages a thriving fungal network, which is almost entirely absent under sterile plastic covers. The overall effect is the creation of a living, breathing soil. The changes are not just chemical, they are biological and structural. The soil becomes darker in color as its carbon content increases. It develops a crumbly, aggregated structure that holds both air and water perfectly. It smells sweet and earthy, a sign of a healthy aerobic ecosystem. This is a stark contrast to the sour, compacted soil found under plastic. By simply providing the right kind of food and cover on the surface, we empower the natural world to do what it does best. Create a fertile, resilient, and self-sustaining environment for plants to thrive in. The thickness of the mulch layer is, honestly, a critical factor for success. It's really a delicate balance. If the layer is too thin, it just won't be effective at its primary jobs. A light sprinkling of compost might provide a little bit of food for the soil, but it won't be substantial enough to block sunlight from reaching the surface. This means that weed seeds present in the soil, or those that blow in on the wind, will still have enough light to germinate and grow. A thin layer also offers very little in the way of moisture conservation or temperature regulation. It'll dry out quickly and provide minimal insulation, which sort of diminishes many of the key benefits of mulching. On the other hand, applying a layer that's too thick can also cause problems, especially with certain types of organic matter. While a deep layer of compost is generally beneficial, piling on an excessively thick mat of something like fresh grass clippings can create an anaerobic barrier. This dense, wet layer can prevent oxygen from reaching the soil surface, leading to smelly, slimy decomposition that frankly can harm both soil life and plant roots. Similarly, a very deep layer of mulch can create a haven for slugs and other pests, giving them a dark, damp place to hide and multiply. It can also keep the soil too cool and wet in the spring, which slows down the growth of heat-loving plants. So, what is the ideal thickness? Well, through years of trials and observations in my own garden, I've found that a layer of about 5 centimeters or 2 inches of well-rotted compost or other old plant residue is just right for most situations. This depth is sufficient to form a light-proof barrier that will suppress the vast majority of annual weeds. It's also substantial enough to insulate the soil effectively, keeping it moist and at a stable temperature. This 5 centimeter layer provides a generous food supply for the earthworms and soil microbes for an entire season, without being so deep that it creates anaerobic conditions or excessively slows soil warming in the spring. This application is typically done just once a year, either in late autumn or early spring. You simply spread the compost evenly over the surface of the bed around any existing perennial plants. There's no need to dig it in. The worms and other soil life will do the work of incorporating it for you over the coming months. For areas with very persistent perennial weeds like bindweed or couch grass, you might start with a thicker layer, perhaps combined with a layer of cardboard underneath for the first year. But for general maintenance and soil building, a consistent annual application of 5 centimeters is really the simple, effective rule to follow. The fundamental principle behind using ancient plant residue as mulch is that we're actually feeding the soil, and in turn, the soil feeds the plants. This, honestly, is a crucial shift from the conventional gardening mindset, which so often focuses on feeding the plant directly with liquid or granular fertilizers. When we apply synthetic fertilizers, we're basically providing a quick hit of soluble nutrients directly to the plant roots. Sure, this can lead to rapid, lush growth, but it does so at the expense of the soil ecosystem. The plants become dependent on these chemical inputs, and the soil life, the microbes and fungi that should be providing these nutrients naturally, are bypassed and can diminish over time. An organic mulch of compost, though, works in a completely different way. It provides a slow and steady release of nutrients mediated by the soil food web. The compost itself isn't a direct plant food. Instead, it's food for the billions of microorganisms and invertebrates living in the soil. Bacteria, fungi, protozoa, and earthworms all consume the organic matter. As they live, digest, and die, they release the nutrients locked within the compost in a simple plant-available form. This process happens gradually, providing a constant trickle of nutrition to the plants throughout the entire growing season. It really helps prevent that boom and bust cycle of growth you often see with chemical fertilizers. This method of feeding is, well, perfectly paced. The activity of the soil microbes is dependent on temperature and moisture, just like the growth of the plants. In spring, as the soil warms up, the microbes become more active and release more nutrients, just as the plants are beginning their period of rapid growth. In the cold of winter, microbial activity slows down and nutrient release is minimal, which is absolutely fine because the plants are dormant. The system is self-regulating. The plants are able to take up the nutrients they need when they need them, because the life in the soil is providing them in perfect sync with the seasons. This process also provides a complete and balanced diet for your plants. Compost contains a huge range of macro and micronutrients, as well as trace elements that are often missing from synthetic fertilizers. Chemical fertilizers typically provide just the big three: nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. But plants need a much wider array of elements for healthy growth, disease resistance, and nutrient density. By feeding the soil with a complex organic material like compost, you are ensuring that this full spectrum of nutrients becomes available to your plants, leading to healthier growth and more nutritious food for you. One of the most profound benefits of consistently mulching with old plant residue is the dramatic improvement in soil structure, which happens entirely without digging or tilling. Good soil structure is the foundation of a healthy garden. It refers to the arrangement of soil particles into small clumps or aggregates. This aggregated structure creates a network of pore spaces of all different sizes. Large pores allow for drainage and air circulation, ensuring plant roots and soil organisms have the oxygen they need. Small pores are essential for holding on to water, making it available to plants during dry periods. A well-structured soil is crumbly, resists compaction, and is easy for roots to grow through. This ideal structure is created by the very soil life that the compost mulch feeds. As earthworms burrow through the soil, they create stable channels that improve aeration and drainage. More importantly, the soil life produces natural glues that bind tiny particles of clay, silt, and sand together into aggregates. Fungi, with their vast networks of thread-like hyphae, physically wrap around soil particles, pulling them together. Bacteria produce sticky polysaccharides that act as a glue. The waste products from worms and other organisms also help to cement these aggregates. This entire process is a natural and continuous form of soil engineering. Modern mulches do the opposite. Plastic sheeting compacts the soil surface by blocking air and trapping excessive moisture, leading to the breakdown of aggregates. The lack of organic matter means there's no food for the soil organisms, so this natural structure building process just ceases. Tilling and digging, even with the best intentions, also destroys soil structure. It shatters the aggregates, breaks up the fungal networks, and kills many beneficial organisms. While it may temporarily loosen the soil, it quickly slumps and compacts again, often worse than before, because the biological glues that held it together have been destroyed. With a no-dig compost mulch approach, you're protecting and nurturing this process. By leaving the soil undisturbed and adding organic matter to the surface, you provide the perfect conditions for the soil food web to thrive. Year after year, as you add another layer of compost, the worms and microbes will draw it down, continuously building and improving the soil structure from the top. The soil becomes deeper, darker, more fertile, and more resilient. It soaks up heavy rain without flooding and holds onto moisture through droughts. This beautiful, crumbly structure is a visible sign that your garden is functioning as a healthy, living ecosystem. A fascinating and powerful outcome of nurturing healthy soil with ancient mulch is the marked improvement in plant health and their resistance to pests and diseases. This isn't a coincidence, it's a direct result of the living ecosystem you've created. A plant growing in vibrant, biologically active soil is like a person who eats a healthy, balanced diet. It has all the resources it needs to be strong and resilient. The steady supply of a full spectrum of nutrients from the microbially active compost allows the plant to build strong cell walls and produce the complex chemical compounds it uses to defend itself against attack. Many common pests are drawn to plants that are weak or stressed. Aphids, for example, are often a sign that a plant has an imbalance of nutrients, particularly an excess of nitrogen from synthetic fertilizers, which results in soft, sappy growth that's easy for them to feed on. Plants grown in compost-mulched, no-dig beds have a more balanced nutrient uptake, leading to tougher, less susceptible growth. Furthermore, a healthy soil ecosystem is home to a wide range of predatory insects, spiders, centipedes and beetles that feed on common garden pests. The compost mulch provides a perfect habitat for these beneficial creatures, creating a natural pest control service right in your garden beds. The same principle applies to diseases. Many plant diseases are caused by pathogenic fungi or bacteria in the soil. In a sterile or unhealthy soil, these pathogens can multiply without check. However, in a soil teeming with diverse microbial life, the pathogens are outcompeted and suppressed. The vast numbers of beneficial bacteria and fungi that thrive in and under a compost mulch occupy all the available space and consume all the available food, leaving nothing for the disease-causing organisms. Some beneficial fungi are even known to actively prey on pathogenic species, creating a protective barrier around the plant roots. This is the soil's own immune system at work. In contrast, modern mulches and conventional practices can make disease problems worse. Plastic mulch can trap moisture against the plant stems, creating the damp conditions that fungal diseases like blight and mildew love. The sterile environment it creates under the surface does nothing to suppress soil-borne pathogens. Using fungicides and pesticides further disrupts the delicate balance, killing beneficial organisms along with the pests and creating a dependency on chemical intervention. By focusing on building soil health with an ancient mulch of compost, you're not just growing plants, you're cultivating a resilient system that can largely look after itself, reducing the need for any chemical sprays. As my gardening journey has progressed, the conclusion has become wonderfully clear. The ancient method of mulching with old plant residue, or compost, consistently outperforms modern alternatives in every way that truly matters for long-term garden health. The comparison is honestly stark. Plastic and fabric covers create a sterile, compacted, and lifeless soil. They're a short-term fix for weeds that ultimately damages the very foundation of your garden. Dyed wood chips look tidy but can rob the soil of nitrogen. and do little to feed the vibrant ecosystem beneath the surface. They're more of a decoration than a functional part of the garden system. The ancient mulch method transforms the entire garden. It improves water retention so dramatically that my watering is cut by more than half. It awakens the soil, bringing in a huge population of worms and beneficial microbes that build fertility for free. It results in stronger, healthier plants that are far more resistant to pests and diseases, eliminating the need for chemical sprays. The soil structure becomes beautifully crumbly and resilient, able to handle both heavy rain and dry spells. All of this is achieved by simply spreading a layer of homemade or locally sourced compost on the surface once a year. It's a system that builds on itself, growing more fertile and easier to manage with each passing season. This simple, powerful method fell out of favor with the rise of the chemical industry and the marketing of convenience. We were sold the idea of quick fixes, weed killer sprays, plastic sheets, and bags of so-called low-maintenance bark. The focus shifted from nurturing the soil to controlling nature. But this convenience came at a high cost to our soil's health and the nutritional quality of our food. We forgot the wisdom of our ancestors, who understood that the secret to a great garden lies not in battling it, but in feeding the life within the soil and letting that life do the work. I urge you to try this in your own garden. Take one bed and commit to the no-dig, compost mulch method. Stop digging, cover the surface with cardboard if you've got a lot of weeds, and top it with a 5 centimeter layer of compost. Plant directly into the compost, then just watch what happens. Observe the increase in worms, the improved texture of the soil, and the health of your plants. The results will speak for themselves. Returning to this old proven way is not a step backward, it's a profound step forward into a more sustainable, productive and joyful way of gardening in partnership with nature.